We'd like to welcome you all back to the Trampled Underfoot Podcast show. And we're your hosts, Mark Lindsay over there, and I'm Eloy Escagedo here in Miami. Oh, yeah. Mark is over there in Oregon, which is would you say it's the Medford area, we could say?
That's Southern Oregon. There's
Oregon.
not a whole heck of a lot in Southern Oregon, so that kind of narrows it down.
There's no out of the way.
Yeah, well, we are out of the way. That's what I mean. So I tell people it's not the end of the earth, but you can see it from here.
But wherever you are at,
mm-hmm.
like I'm over here in Miami,
right,
and you're over there, wherever one is at is the center of the map. At least in my mind, like I'm centered in Miami right now, so everything just expands out from Miami. That's not true, but in my mind, I have to see it that way because I'm occupying this darn space right here,
This is going to go off on a tangent, big time, but you said this isn't true. It is true. The center of the universe is based upon the person watching it because the universe is ever expanding. There is no real center of the universe because it's limited. The universe is expanding, so wherever you are, that is the center of the universe.
Man, I don't see that's dangerous. So it is to you, right? It's always going to be to you the center. But there has to be nothing has to be, but I would like to hope that there's a Valhalla, like there's a location, there's a central hub, I'd like to think that out, beyond one's self.
Actually, I have to take that back. I just did a little bit of research. The center of the universe is in Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Okay, I can buy that. You see, I don't even have to. I'm not going to even question it. Tulsa, it is.
Yeah. It's called the center of the universe. It's a small concrete circle in the middle of a larger circle of bricks. Not much to look at. It's a mysterious acoustical phenomenon. You stand in the middle of the circle and make any noise. The sound is echoed back several times louder than the original sound. It's an amplifying echo chamber, basically.
Did you have, when you were growing up, did you guys have a planetarium in your... Yeah. Did you guys have, like, the planetarium has the observatory, whatever, but outside in our situation, there was a garden area, and in that garden, they had little scientific things.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have the same type of deal?
It was a big complex in San Francisco. You had the Morrison Planetarium, Steinhardt Aquarium, the Museum of Natural Sciences. It was a big, massive complex of buildings in Golden Gate Park. And you could literally spend a full day at any one of those facilities. So it was a big, big thing.
I loved in LA, the Griffith Observatory.
Mm-hmm.
And there was, if I remember correctly, there was a museum. I hope it wasn't I think that because it's been a while. There was a museum, and you walked the museum. I forget what the actual displays were, but at some point it connected, or you'd go outside and you'd end up at that little observatory where James Dean fought with a knife. And I ended up being over there, and all I could think of was James Dean was here. That's what I thought. That was my one thought. And the sights, it's just, California is really beautiful. It really is, dude. It's stunning.
I'll agree with you there. California has some gorgeous country of every shape, size, and type. You can go from pine forest and giant redwoods to desert to coastal ranges. It's just a shame it's in California.
Well, I was gonna say, in our observatory in Miami, we had this little thing, because you were talking about the voice, that place in Tulsa.
Mhm.
Well, in our what do you
Observatory.
yeah, we had in the garden a rod that stuck out the ground, and it had a hoop. And then way across the way, there was another rod with another hoop. And behind the hoops, now I'm remembering, behind the hoops, there were these domed out, like satellite dish type things.
Mhm.
And you would talk through the hoop.
Right.
I don't know if the hoop was big. I think it was a little hoop.
Mhm.
I forget the size, but you'd talk, and then you'd have a friend on the other side, and it's like they're talking to you right there, and they'd call back and say, "Let's do it again. Let's do it." And all you're doing is just talking. But kids love it. I mean,
Yeah.
hell, I'd love it. Just to say, did you have something like that over there?
We had in San Francisco at the Palace of Fine Arts, there was it was a hands-on museum called the Exploratorium that was science-based. I mean, and they had things like that. They had there was one row of handsets that you could pick up like a telephone and speak into it, and your voice would come back to you delayed. And you had different buttons that had different time delays on them. And you could scramble your voice. You could do all kinds of weird stuff with your voice. And it did have experiments like that. There was this big dome, and I'm trying to remember the attraction of it was is you could stand underneath this big dome and just speak in a normal voice, and you can be heard all over the grounds. It reflected acoustically that much.
That's so freaking awesome.
They had an echo chamber where you could snap your fingers like that, and it sounded like a tank gun firing.
Yeah.
And then they had an anechoic chamber that was sound absorbing, where you could clap your hands as loud as you wanted to, and it sounded like you were snapping your fingers like this. It just absorbed all sound. There was no reverberation at all.
That's so cool.
It was all kinds of stuff. I mean, there was there were experiments on pressure, and I say experiments, they were displays, but it was all hands-on. You could do things. It wasn't just walking by and looking at something behind glass. You were actually doing things with inertia or pressure or centrifugal force or things like that. It was very, very cool place. I loved it.
Well, let me ask you this about that. Mm-hmm. It's not a museum or science-y type thing, but have you ever been to a Spencer's or Sharper Image, or it's sort of those little stores with all the different types of like massage stuff and cool
executive toys? Yeah.
Tell me, is there anybody that's ever been in one of those malls and seen that store and gone into that store that has not sat in the full-on massage chair and stuck their hand through it so that everything is massaging? I mean, I don't think that there's one red-blooded American in this country that has had the privilege of going into that store and seeing that chair. I don't even know the brand of the chair because it's the ticket on it always says like $3 million or something like that.
You have to sit down in the massage chair, but I didn't like it. It always, what it reminded me of? It reminded me of having a 4-year-old sitting behind you in the movies. Kicking the seat. Because that's all it did. It was just
and but it can get a little bit aggressive because there's like these rotating balls with the leather, and your feet or your legs like fit into like this little concave thing where and then it squeezes. But if depending on the setting, it can squeeze the crap out of you, dude.
Exactly. That's what I mean. It reminded me of having a 4-year-old sit behind me at the movies. It just beat the crap out of me from behind. So, no thanks. But you're right. You have to try it. It's kind of like, oh God, I can't think of what it's called. Newton's Cradle, I think is what it's called. It's like a little rack that sits on a tabletop, and it has like 6 or 8, maybe 10 steel balls suspended from a little chain.
Okay. Yes.
And you lift one up and let go of it, and it
Yeah.
smacks the whole line, and the other one lifts up, and it comes. You can't walk past one of those things
And
without
not do it.
without doing it. You just can't. I think it's a law.
Well, do you remember also in those stores? And we did have in our, and I've talked about it, and we've talked to, in Miami, there's this whole thing called the barefoot mailman, which back during the war and even earlier, like there's a history with that. The reason I'm not saying what the history is because I can't remember to save my life. But there would be mailmen that would walk on the sand from community to community and bring people the mail, barefoot mailmen. And there were stores that were just like what we're talking about. And they had all these gadgets and all these weird and masks and all these.
Yeah.
Well, there was this one thing, and I'm sure you've seen it, where it's like a box with all these like flat head nails, and you could put your hand on it.
I can't remember what that's called, but yes, I was just thinking of the same thing.
How cool is that?
You have to pick it up, shake it up, and then put your hand on it.
Yeah.
It's just like, can you walk by an Etch-a-Sketch without picking it up and shaking it? And then
impossible.
Do the knobs, you got to.
I mean, it's just one of those things, dude. So let me share so that we can progress through the things. So I just wanted to share, and I'm going to post a video of it. I think you'll find it interesting. I don't know that I'm going to do it justice whatsoever, but I'll just tell the story. So I ran across the story about a comic book guy, and I think that you'll find it incredibly fascinating. I could be wrong. So in Colorado, there's a comic book place called Mile High Comics. Okay. Very, very famous place. And the gentleman that owns it, he's owned it since the 70s. His name is Chuck Zausaski. Oh man, I should have Rosansky.
Okay.
Chuck Rosansky. Well, so back in the turnover from the 70s into the 80s, he used to sell comic books through comic books, mail order. And he had this backlog. He would buy huge bulks of comic books, right, and then he'd sell it mail order. And that's how his business, but he was always just scraping along, making huge deals, spending a lot of money, making that lot of money back and a little bit more. So he was dealing with big numbers, but he wasn't really, you know what I'm saying?
But it was a profit. Yeah.
There was a profit, but it was a difficult thing because the margins and whatever, but his business was working. Well, he got to the point where back issues, which is what he was, marketing in, were harder and harder to come by. And he saw himself selling his prized possessions of those early comic books in order to make ends meet. So he was selling off his stuff, his personal collection,
right?
And then he hit a brick wall, and he was looking for a deal that he can buy many comics and see if he can get out of the hole. And lo and behold, he got a phone call from a guy from New York, and over the phone he said that, hey, I've got over 1 million comics for you. And he was, well, tell me more. And he says, well, I'm over here in New York. I've got over 1 million comics, and they're in a warehouse, and I think he said 500,000 for it, something to that effect. And he said, and they're all pre-1979 or something to that effect. So in the comic book industry, everything pre-1979 was the age of where it wasn't marketed the way it was in the 80s. back then, most of them were on racks or newsstands and so on. So it was a little bit, there were comic stores, but it was a little different. And so they had a lot of 12-cent issues, which are could be probably very expensive. And he was intrigued because this would be the fuel to continue on his work, because he was in trouble. And so he couldn't believe it, but he said this might be the ticket. So he got a flight out to New York, and he met the guy, and they went to the warehouse, and it was a huge warehouse, and the guy opened up the padlock, and when they opened up the doors, there were boxes 5 foot tall, so packed in that the whole warehouse, you couldn't walk in, of comic books. And the guy of the warehouse got up over the boxes and went and pulled on a chain and turned on the lights. And he says, well, what's going on here? He says, nothing. My dad is in jail. His dad was in jail for doing some illicit trading of pornography, let's say. Uh-oh. And he's got to get rid of all of this, and because he's coming out of jail and he needs this to get him through. And he's got all these boxes, and he's charged me with doing that. And I might make a little side money from doing this favor for him. And so he put that to the side. He says, well, that's kind of a weird thing. And how did he get all these comic books? It turns out that the mafia was dealing with these comic books. And what they would do is that back in the day, and still to this day, racks would be filled with comic books, and if they didn't sell, they'd come in, pull those old comic books, rip the front covers off,
right,
and send off the covers to the publisher, to the vendor, so they could see that they destroyed the comic books. Right. Well, what the mafia did was that they would pull the comic books and write a bill of goods saying that yes, it was all destroyed, but they'd take those comic books and they'd store them. And it looks like they've been doing that since the 1930s or 40s. This is one aspect of like the many hustles that these people did, even in the comic book world. So this warehouse is full of comic books from back in the day. And so he said, well, I got to take a look at this. So he climbed up and he went through the top layer, and sure enough, like old, like, Action Comics and old this and that, 12 cents on the thing. And he's like, holy smokes. And he said that, no, I'm going to have to dig to the bottom because maybe they're just caking the top to make it pretty. So he dug down and stuff. And sure enough, like these are freaking like 20 to 30% of the comics were vintage 12-cent comic books. And the other ones were older than the 1970s, which means that they're all valuable.
Okay.
And this is the fuel that he needs. So he says, okay, so look, I can't do 500,000. How about this much? I forget the amount, but it was significantly less, maybe 100 and something thousand. Right. But this guy's trying to get rid of it. And so he says, sure, we'll do that. So he goes back to, thinking, and he was worried. And he said, are these people doing some, iffy things? Because just what I explained, that they would take and break the covers and such, and some people would keep them. And he had sworn never to use that kind of those type of magazines, because what happens is that it's unethical. He's a comic book guy, and they should be destroyed. So he called the people at Marvel, and they said, no, the what do they call it? The time has passed so that there's no logistical. We can't do anything.
The statute of limitations has passed?
It's passed, and these are 12-cent. We can't really do anything about that. So you have our blessing. You can go ahead and make the deal. So he went back. He got trucks from a Colorado company that packed meat and shipped it across the country, and he paid them on the side like $20,000 or something, and they started loading up all the comic books and took them away. And so the mafia was involved. later the father came out of jail, and his son, he died a few months later, and his son didn't get anything. The guy's wife got everything. The guy got totally, yeah. And so the whole story. But now this guy from Mile High Comics, Chuck, I forget the last name, Chuck Zozansky. He's got this warehouse comic book store in Colorado called Mile High Comics, and it's a warehouse, and you walk in and all that collection is there, and it just goes on and on and on, and it's just an amazing story. There's more to it than that. I wanted to share it. I wasn't going to do it justice, but I will link it for those that are interested on our Trampled Underfoot podcast page, because the guy does narrate his own story, and there's a lot of little comic images and stuff, and he does do a good job of telling the story. It's his story. So
now let me. I got a bunch of ways to go on this. So, did he go through and collate and figure out everything he had and inventory what he had?
He made a educated calculation by the volume of comic books, and he went down and digging and looking at them and realized that what it was and what. Well, no,
what I mean, after he got him back to Colorado, did he go through them all and organize them and figure out what all he had?
Oh, I didn't tell you that. Yes, he. What happened was that he went to the bank because he didn't have the money. Right. By the way, because remember, we were saying 500,000 and he offered 100,000. I never told you that. He went to the bank and he was friends with the banker. So because of being friends with the banker, they were going to loan him the 100 and something thousand, but he had to put the keys to his house in the pot, and all, so there was no, basically, friends or no friends, you're going to have to. And so he risked it, and he went to his wife, and his wife said, yeah, do it. Talk about, he mentions his wife in the thing that she believed in him. So he went back with the money, and then the guy said, no, I forgot to tell you that part. He said no, and he says, well, look, we had already made the deal, just, you're going to sign and we're going to do it. He says, no, I want more than that, because my dad's, he put money on the table, $20,000 or something. He says, you can have this, and if you sign now, if not, I take this money, and you're not going to make a dime. Your dad comes out and do whatever you're going to do. And so he looked at the money, and then he says, and I'll do you one more. I'll take one issue or a couple of issues out of every pile and send them to your kids. And he says, okay, I'll do it with all that. And so then he signed. But anyways, he collated everything. And there's rows and rows in his warehouse that people come in and purchase and all that. Rows and rows and rows and rows.
Now, did he find anything particularly valuable? Because I know there are certain issues out there that are on people's dreams list. Did he find, or did he even mention that he found anything of particular value?
They show a few comic books in the video, but that are old and vintage, but he didn't go into the specific issues and this and that. Okay. So I don't know, but just by judging the warehouse that he that's his showroom.
Yeah. So he didn't have like issue 1 of Superman or issue 1 of Batman or something like that. Nothing that was like, worth $1 million.
See, they don't, a lot of those comic books, and he did take it to the Comic-Con in 1985. Because that's sort of the year where all this was happening.
Well, okay, so this was in the 80s. This happened. Okay,
this was in the 80s. So you can imagine he took it to the Comic-Con to make some money to balance out the problem, because he just made a huge business deal with comic books on a loan, and he's trying to make his money back. And he said that raked him in more than $15 million.
Jeez.
From that time on, that the value in the collection.
Wow.
So he went to the Comic-Con in the 80s at the time to try to sort of get head above water. And he said he took like 10,000 comic books or something. I don't know. And he came back with 9,000. So like he didn't sell enough to anything. So he was hot water for a long while. But when he came back, his actual mail order business was thriving because of the comic inventory that he had people were ordering through the mail. And he exploded. And in fact, Mile High Comics is like really well known for decades. Because the guy is like insanely good.
He's got to be well known. If this was 30 years ago, or 40 years ago now, he's got to be well known in the comic book circles.
Yeah, I had never I have heard of Mile High Comics, but I had never heard of
that story. And
I just liked it so much. And I remember when I was watching it, I said, "Oh, I got to tell Mark this." But I remember also saying, "There's no way I'm going to be." And in fact, I didn't do the story justice. There's no explosions. There's no like aliens flying down. But it's such a good story because it's the story of an entrepreneur, the struggle. And then the mob is involved in it and other things that I didn't mention.
That sounds interesting. Yeah. So you're going to put a link to that over on the Trampled Underfoot Podcast Facebook page, right?
Yeah. For those that are interested, I'll link it because
please do because I'd like to check it out.
All right. Cool.
So now I got to ask you, you were talking about, so it's several different genres of comic book and what have you. You were more the action comic book guy, right?
Yeah, I liked the
superheroes and stuff. Yeah. Okay. So this leads me, because I went in several different directions. I mean, I bought a few comics, but I don't know if you would call them comic books or not, because I was into Mad Magazine. And then we had these magazines, I guess you would call them comic books. It was like Hot Rod cartoons. And then there was another one called Cartoons, and it was all hot rods and racers and all this goofy stuff. It wasn't so much they were not episodic. They were just whatever small short stories that had to do with hot rods and stuff. And then Mad Magazine also. I don't know if you ever got into Mad Magazine or not.
I bought maybe 2 magazines of Mad Magazine, and the rest of the time I just thumbing through the pages at your local bookstore, whatever. I never got into them, although it was cool because they had but it felt like I didn't fall into that vibe. I was more into the just like the superhero story. It felt like more, I don't know, to my liking. I just but I saw the creativity in the but it was jokey sometimes.
Yes, and that's what it was. It was all parody, and that's what I liked about it. But I'm talking about like 1969 through 1970, 78, 79, somewhere in that area. That's about the time I stopped buying it. But so we're talking about the late 60s all the way through the 70s, and they were doing movie parody stories and things like that. It was all just, Sergio Aragonés, Spy versus Spy, and a bunch of different characters. But so you were more of the action type. Now, let me ask you about that. Have you watched or followed any of the DC or Marvel Universe movies? Iron Man, The Incredible Hulk, Avengers, any of those?
I have. And it's some are they're all right. I don't get submerged. The Iron Mans were good. I don't know what it is, dude. I think age or whatever your station is at the moment. Yes, I like them, but the thrill that I used to get from it, like when I was a kid, as opposed to now, like as a kid, I was like all in, You know, put the blinders on. I don't want
With
to
you.
know nothing. And now it's sort of like, okay, well, whatever. I'll watch it. It's okay. There's some cool stuff, but it's not. I don't know what happened to me, dude. I think I got older.
Were you much of a science fiction fan as a kid? Science fiction movies and what have you?
Yeah, I was okay with it.
Mhm.
I don't know, man. It wasn't a bit. You know what's funny? I could read a comic book of superheroes and this and that. I could read one. I could read a comic book series. But if you give me a book,
Yeah.
of fantasy,
Well, no, I mean like the movies.
oh no, yeah. The movies I'll watch. I like the Lord of the Rings.
Mhm.
I'm
I've
all
never seen
in
that.
for. I really like the Lord of the Rings, the Hobbit, the movies. I know there's the book equivalent to them,
Mhm.
but the problem is I can't make that leap. When you're talking about and then the orb and names, so they describe things that your brain has to fill in the blanks because there's nothing really like it in reality. And maybe what you're thinking, and this is what I would think when I'm reading these things, am I reading this right? Is it that the orb had the lightning and the lightning was blue? How's that work?
Yeah.
I start thinking too much.
Yeah. Well, that's what it's for. It's there to
Yeah.
provoke that. You have to use your imagination to fill it out because there's only so much you can do with a few panels per page.
Well, yeah, but see, with a biography, which I really always loved, I literally always loved. There's something about this is the world we live in. This happened in this world, and yes, indeed, that's a wall, and that's where the person was sitting leaning up against while he was waiting for the car to bring him that package to take to that secret meeting location. I can deal with that in reality, but reading a huge without any pictures and it be fantasy is hard for me to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's weird. It's weird to say. It's hard for
Oh,
me.
no, not really. I mean, some people just don't like to read much for entertainment, and I get
There
that. It's
you
not for
go
everyone.
again.
No, that's not what I meant. It's not what I meant at all. You take it the wrong way. When I say read for entertainment, I've got a book sitting on my nightstand. It's that thick. It's everything Arthur Conan Doyle wrote about Sherlock Holmes. It's every Sherlock Holmes story from the
You've
very
told me,
first
yeah.
one. And I've gone through it probably 6 times. And I'll go through it another 6 or 10 or 12. But, it's just something like, I've been doing it since I was a kid. But where I was going with this was, okay, I have started, and you said something about age, and that's what got me on the science fiction thing, because I have noticed here that I'm a little bit older now, and I'm starting to go back and look at some of this stuff. My relationship with Batman and Robin ended with Adam West and Burt Ward. I've never sat down and watched any of the Batman movies. I did see the first Superman when it came out with Christopher Reeve. But I haven't seen anything after that.
You've not seen a single.
And I thought it was a good movie. I really did. It's just back then, we went to the drive-in and that was about it.
Yeah.
So then that's where I saw that movie, was at the drive-in. I just didn't go any further from there.
Yeah.
But with my little excursions here, doing this podcast and getting recommendations from you, and also from just stuff that I'm seeing in my recommendeds on YouTube and what have you, I'm starting to eyeball the Marvel Universe. I'm starting to look at it. I've seen a few little scenes.
I love how this multi-billion-dollar institution and you're like just like, well, they're starting to sort of.
And part of it is my wife as well. I mean, we've said it before. She likes Chris Pratt. So she has been watching the Guardians of the Galaxy series. And I was talking with her the other day and I said, that they're a part of the Marvel Universe. Have you got any kind of desire to go watch any of the other Marvel universe. And she's like, no, not really. But I'm noticing a bunch of different little connections that I never would have made before if I hadn't started seeing these little suggested clips coming in on YouTube.
Yeah.
There is a British talk show I like to watch. It's the Graham Norton show. He is kind of sort of comparable to Johnny Carson, but very different in that he doesn't bring out one guest and that guest goes away, then another guest comes on and they go away and another guest comes on. He brings out everybody at once and he runs it for an hour.
Yeah,
and everybody's talking.
Yeah.
Well, some of these actors who were portraying the Marvel characters have been on his show. And listening to them talk about how they made the movie and some of the behind the scenes stuff. I mean, everything from like, and this, I know this is not Marvel Universe, but everything from Samuel L. Jackson, when he was in Star Wars, he convinced George Lucas to give him a purple lightsaber so that he could find himself in the big battle scenes. You know?
Yeah.
And just little things like that. And what's the guy? Tom Holland talking with Gwyneth Paltrow, and she forgot she was in a movie with him and everything, and just all that kind of stuff. And seeing all that going on behind the scenes has got me watching some of these clips, and I think I might be trading in my mantle of cultural infidel. I might just start watching some of this stuff. I don't know, man.
I don't want to ruin it for you, but you know, a thought popped into my head.
Mm-hmm.
Here's my question to you. Do I share the thought that popped into my head, or do I keep it to myself? It's
you brought it up. You might as well share it, because I mean, you know what you just did was you opened the refrigerator door, and now you're saying, should I look in it?
I was thinking when you said that you know you're sort of like, you know, you're cruising the down the road and you're saying, you know what, we might stop and check that out, you know.
Yeah.
I hope that here's what I'm worried about. Because of your what's the word that you always say?
Cultural infidel.
Cultural infidelity.
Uh-huh.
I'm afraid that you'll be disappointed, and you'll shut the door on that for the next who knows how long, and then any other movie that's good will just be impossible. So I'm worried about this situation because not all of it is good stuff.
So let's explore that a little bit. Why would I be disappointed? Why, in your opinion, do you think I would be disappointed?
I don't know. Everybody's different, but
sure.
I don't like violence for the sake of violence within the movie thing, with no context. Like the thrill, I like a little bit more of a sophisticated, putting me into the world. And then you have to have the release, so there could be a violent little confrontation, this and that. But if the whole thing is explosion after explosion after explosion after explosion after explosion, back to back, I feel cheated. So some of these movies have that, and then there's the cartoonish, and you can't get away with it because they are cartoon. They are.
Oh, sure.
So that's a little area where, and I know what it is, and I'll just let myself enjoy the movie, but I can see how,
right. You know, I'm not looking for high art here. I'm looking for action and adventure. I mean, you know, I was in that phase for a while myself. I mean, I watched the Die Hard flicks. I watched the, Danny Glover and Mel Gibson. Lethal Weapon, Jackie Chan and Chris Tucker, the Shanghai Moon and Rush Hour flicks.
Yeah.
So the Schwarzenegger and Stallone and First Blood. First Blood was a good movie. Every other Rambo movie after that sucked.
First Blood was badass.
First Blood was a good movie.
Yeah.
But be that as it may. I mean, yeah, Judge Dredd. I mean, I've watched a bunch of this stuff,
Yeah.
but
Okay.
I just never really got caught up in that Marvel Universe thing or the
Oh,
DC
okay.
Universe thing.
All right.
So I'm kind of starting to, because I still stand by this, but the more people ranted and raved about how great it was, the more I knew I was going to hate it.
Which
And
one?
anything. And so for about that 20-year, well, it has been about 20 years since the Marvel Universe really started taking off. Everybody raved about them, and I'm just like, don't want to know nothing about it. I don't want to hear it. Just forget it. I'm out. But now that I'm seeing some of this stuff, it's like, you know what? This may not be bad.
No, by all means. I mean, and by the way, you're in it for like an hour and a half to 2 hours, and you know, I just said that and I realized that the video that you watched was 2 hours.
Yeah, we'll talk about that in a minute.
It's not going to be the end of 2 hours, a block of your existence.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, we spend 2 hours at the drop of at the snap of a finger, just, I don't know, scratching our butts. I don't know.
Yeah. You know,
so
I tell you about the only thing that I think I'm even partially nervous about getting into this Marvel Universe thing, and this is weird for me to talk about, is getting it in the wrong order, because there's no sense and sensibility about how these things were released, because you have movies that were made, and this is some of the fun stuff about it. And that's why Tom Holland and Gwyneth Paltrow were talking about this. They will film a bunch of stuff, but the actors don't know which film it's actually going to end up being in. It could be in one of 4 to 5 different movies. So when Tom Holland says, "Yeah, you were in this movie with me," she was like, "No, I wasn't. I was in this one." He said, "Yeah, that was this one." Well, that's not what they told me. You know, there's a lot of intrigue in that they don't give, half of the actors don't get the script until they're ready to shoot, because they don't want spoilers coming out, and because there's constant changes and revisions. So I'm thinking this could be a fun franchise, but I just don't know which order to watch them in. I was going to start with Iron Man 1, but I don't know that that's the right one to start with.
Iron Man 1, well, I don't know about the order, but Iron Man 1 was fun and entertaining. For me, the Ant-Man 1 was actually entertaining. I liked the Ant-Man 1. Because Ant-Man, it's such a anti-superhero.
Now, I've watched a couple trailers, and one of them that I thought was funny. Now, just because I haven't watched the movies doesn't mean that I'm completely clueless about some of this stuff.
Right.
I do know that universally, the Green Lantern was probably one of the most hated superhero movies out there. With I can't remember his name now to save my life. He's the guy that later went on to play Deadpool. And in one of the trailers, Ryan Reynolds, that's his name. Ryan Reynolds is picking up this script, and he's going, "Oh, the Green Lantern, huh?" And all of a sudden there's a gunshot through the back of his head, and he falls forward, and there's Deadpool standing there going, "You're not making that. You're welcome, Canada." You know, takes off. And that kind of humor just tickles me. So I don't know.
Deadpool's a good one for you to check out then, because he's very slapstick.
Ryan Reynolds is a funny guy. I don't know if you've ever seen him on interviews. He is a genuinely funny guy. He's a genuinely funny guy.
Oh my goodness, the Star Wars series. That's another problem. I go ahead. Because
the only thing I was going to say about Star Wars is, if you are going to dip your toe into the Star Wars universe, watch them in the order in which they were released.
Oh yeah,
because
that'll ruin everything.
Yeah, because that's how they should be. I do know more about Star Wars than, well, the first three anyway.
Yeah.
I know more about that than I do the others, any of the other sci-fi or superhero genres. And more on that in a second too. But only because they came out. I was 16 when A New Hope came out. And when A New Hope came out, it wasn't called A New Hope. It was called Star Wars. It was, for its time, well, even for this time, it was a low budget flick. They didn't know how it was going to go over. They made it, and it was released in the order it was released because they made the first one that was released in 77 to be a standalone film because they didn't know if it was going to do anything. And when it did, when it exploded, they started filming The Empire Strikes Back. After that, they added Chapter 4, A New Hope, to the scrolling title credits and to the title of the movie itself. That way they could leave some continuity.
Yeah.
But yes, the best way to watch Star Wars is in the order that they were released.
Let me amend that.
Because without it, if you watch the first three, part 1, part 2, part 3, then part 4, everything from part 4 on is worthless. There is no value to it because you've destroyed the story.
The story, the problem with so when the new Star Wars came out, what was it, part 1?
Yeah, part 1, The Phantom Menace, I think it
back
was.
in 2000 or something like that. That new, I watched it in the movies, and I was like, all right, it's Star Wars, this and that. I think then they made another one, whatever. And I was like, okay, Star Wars. Well, these are new people and this and that, and there's so many explosions and light and lasers and this and that. And then one day, not too long ago, well, maybe probably about like 8 years ago or something, I ran across a YouTube channel called Red Letter Media.
Okay.
And it's the whole thing of dissecting why Star Wars, the new ones, totally suck. And the guy, he's entertaining, by the way, because he tells jokes. And he's like a grumpy old guy. He's not. He's a young guy with another. But there's a whole theme. They're into reviews, and they're good at it. And he ripped it to shreds, literally, piece by piece. And people, he made millions and millions of views off of his reviews of Star, and he was brutal. And then he did follow-ups, and now what they do is reviews, and they're very onery with they're very, but it's so much fun to see people
just tear them apart, huh?
I mean, it's brutal.
You know, I don't get that hot and heavy, and I don't get that deep into reviews and what have you. But I'll put it to you this way: I'm kind of, I don't know. I'm biased towards the original 3.
Oh my goodness!
New Hope, Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi.
You gotta see Red Letter Media. It will.
So when the first 3 came out, I saw the first one, and it was kind of like, oh, okay. And then the second one, I got about halfway through it, and it's like, I can't do this. And I never saw the third one. I don't know what happens in it. And I certainly haven't watched any of the other ones since. And then when Lucas went back and remastered and added a bunch of crappy CGI to the original 3, I have the originals on VHS. Yeah, one of these days I'm going to find a VCR so I can bring them over to DVD.
Yeah, the originals should have stayed the way they were, because I mean, I'm sure that some of the set extension stuff maybe, but like adding that extra guy or that animal when they're
Yeah.
in Tatooine, I think it was,
Yeah.
hopping along. It just it looks too much for what
It
they should have
looks
left
like
it
a
alone.
cartoon. It
Yeah,
looks
it's
like
bad.
a cartoon. It really is bad.
But then
So-
again, remember, we are looking at it through the lenses of us nowadays. If
Right.
you're a kid,
Mhm. Oh yeah. If
doesn't
you're a
matter.
6-year-old kid or 8, 10-year-old, 12-year-old kid sitting there
Yeah.
watching that, I mean, I've said it before on this podcast. I was 16 when the first one came out in 77, and I saw it at the drive-in. That opening shot after the credits move off into the distance and the quote-unquote camera pans down to that planet, the whole car was just, whoa. And then here comes a spaceship.
Yeah.
And lasers blasting at it, and then an even bigger spaceship. We had never seen anything like that before at all. It was just enormous, and it's like, holy hell! And it's the first minute of that damn movie. I was in it. I'm in this movie.
I know you haven't. I'm sure kids in I'm sure kids in the 70s were blown away. And so here's the thing. I know that you haven't really necessarily watched that 70s show, that sitcom. But in the sitcom, since it's in the 70s, the protagonist Eric is a huge Star Wars fan, to the point where he's an adult and he's a young adult and he's got the toy and this and that, and it gets to the point, and there's always little jokes, but it gets to the point where he's so into the Star Wars, for Halloween he wants his girlfriend Donna to have the little buns and look like and so she does. She dresses up and she surprises him. Hey, Eric. And he looks at her and you can see him just drooling. And he says, can I get close to you? And she says, what? And she says, can I just get closer? And she says, okay. And he grabs one of the buns and he just rests his head on the bun. And it's just so hilarious, dude, because the whole, but I'm sure that kids seeing that for the first time were blown the hell away. I was as a kid, but to see it, like,
I have seen some reaction videos to where, millennials or younger are watching this series for the first time, and they're all like, man, this is rotten CGI. And I'm sitting here to myself going, there is no CGI. That's all practical effects. I mean, Empire Strikes Back, they were stop motion animation. Walking on this, that wasn't snow, it was baking soda being used really well as done. Snow. Yeah, there is no CGI there, so it's just, this is so old and so corny, but it's so it for some reason it's effective. And I'm like, what are you talking about, man? This was absolute, because before that, what we had was the wobbly spaceship coming down on 4 pieces of fishing line. I never really got into Star Trek at all. I mean, I saw a couple episodes when I was a kid. I thought the one with Abraham Lincoln in it was okay. But they invented the whole transporter room thing.
Right.
For budgetary reasons. Because they couldn't afford the special effects to fly a ship down to this planet all the time. So they just walked him into a room and did a slow fade out and added a little bit of animation there in the middle to give it a little sparkle and twinkle.
Yeah.
They did that because they couldn't afford the special effects to make a ship fly around.
I've never liked the transporter thing because there's something slightly sacrilegious about it, in that if would I step into the transporter thing and all your molecules be disintegrated and then recombine somewhere else? There's something where, like, don't you lose something in that situation? You know what I'm saying? There's something wrong with that.
It's science fiction, and anything can happen in science fiction, which brings me back to a point I said I would bring up later.
Yeah.
And I'm going to be, I don't know. I think some people may get upset about this, but we'll find out, because I have always thought that superhero movies were science fiction. But if you say it's science fiction, I mean, they're one step away from lighting the torches and sharpening the pitchforks.
Really?
That's superhero. That's not science fiction. I'm like, well, when you look at what was done to Captain America to make him grow like that and become invincible, something that has not been done by actual science fact yet, that's science fiction. When you look at Superman being from another planet, that's science fiction. When you look at Tony Stark building a wondrous Iron Man suit that can take a direct hit from a tank and not just be completely disintegrated,
it's all
science fiction. So, get off me about that, y'all.
Well, it's a broad, science fiction is the broad category. And then you might have your monster type, and then you might have your superhero but people don't want to be nuanced about it. But actually, by you saying it's just science fiction, that's not being nuanced. But you're right. People just have to understand that it's the umbrella category for all these different things. Now,
I can see how it would be a subgenre, because you're absolutely right. You have that science fiction / fantasy element. So, wizards and warriors and, things like that. That's on the fantasy side. And science fiction could be, the superhero thing could be a subgenre of the science fiction mothership, if you will. See what I did there? So, but I don't think, I don't think you could differentiate it from science fiction based on, just the evidence at hand.
Yeah, it's just people don't, their preference is I guess superhero or Marvel.
Right.
I don't know what the terminology. Look, I'm all for you watching it. My worry is that
I will not consider this an Eloy recommendation. This is something I'm coming up with on my own. I'm just wondering if I'm still going to be able to hold on to the mantle of cultural infidel if I go all in on this series.
I'll tell you what. If you sit and watch a full season of Jersey Girls, or what is it? No, what is it? The Kardashians.
Oh no, that's not going to happen. That is not going to happen.
Is there a Jersey Girls series?
There's the Dairy Girls. There was Jersey Shore, and there was, I think you've mixed 3 or 4 different metaphors there.
No, but the Kardashian. If you a full season back to back,
that's not going to happen.
Well, you don't know.
No, I do know, because I consider shows like that, I call them bimbo commercials, because that's just, it's either bimbos on them or bimbos watching them. And I just have absolutely no interest in any of that stuff.
You see where that mouth is going to get you? Look at what you're saying. Hey, you do not know.
What is she going to sue?
No, but notice there is an unspoken, like I see it. I see the comments all the time, and I'm one of them. But I never outwardly say it. But people are proud. I've never seen this happen. People are actually proud to never have seen a single episode of the, what do you call them again? The people we're talking about, the Kardashians.
Yeah, well, I'm one of those people. I've never seen a single episode of that.
Right, but
I've never seen Jersey Shore.
But there's this whole sort of like unspoken thing, which I like, because like back in the day there were similar things. There's a whole thing where people are proud of not watching a single episode of this show. It's so refreshing.
But it's a thing. Like, they talk and they have a group and they do this, that, the other. Yeah, I've never seen this. Well, today I didn't watch this. That, to me, that's going off the other end of the. But I mean, no, I've never been into that exploitation, gay nuns on dope type television. Don't no. Maury Povich, forget it. Jerry Springer, no thanks. The Kardashians, or what was that one? Road Rules, or Big Brother, or The Bachelor. None of that stuff. I just no. Come on. Come on. I mean, there's other things to do. If your life has devolved to the point to where you're watching 16 and Pregnant on a regular basis, you need to get a friend. You need to get more than one friend. Do yourself a favor. Pick up the remote, shut off the TV, and go outside. Doesn't matter, front yard, backyard. Just go outside.
Dude, it's a wasteland out there, dude. It's all on the computer. All your you go outside your door, you're liable to get yourself into some kind of trouble. At very worst, there's pollen out there.
Yeah.
Whilst inside, you've got a refrigerator, toilet, and your computer. I don't know, dude. This whole going outside to change perspective thing is a little frightening and a little bit, I don't know.
It's good for your complexion. Go outside and skip the tanning bed. Just go outside. Go stand in the sun for a little bit. Breathe some fresh air. Change your perspective.
Look at the clouds.
Yeah, really. That one looks like a chicken. Yeah. I said something a little bit earlier. I know we got to wrap this up. I said something a little bit earlier. You were talking about you couldn't believe I sat and watched this whole movie, and I'm putting you on the spot. Yes, I am.
Mm-hmm.
Eloy just a couple of days ago released a video on his YouTube channel. In fact, you released it. It wasn't yesterday. It was the day before.
Was it the day before?
It may have been. Yeah, it may have been yes. Yeah, it was yesterday. And I don't know if I don't want to put you on the spot, but I don't know if you want to link it over on our Facebook page. But this guy released a close to 2-hour video made in documentary style where he traced back his family surname and the history of the surname, and then delved into the history of his family. And I'm not a member of Eloy's family. I have no connection with any of these people. But this thing was absolutely fascinating to me. I sat and watched the whole thing. It's well paced. It's well put together. It's a lot of information to take in, but it is backed up with documents. It's backed up with footage and photographs. And it tells the story of a people that I'm proud to say I know one of them. It was just flippin' fascinating. Starting as far back as the 1200s and coming up to yourself and your father. And the stories, because there are several people that he documents. It was really well done, really well laid out. And, I would highly suggest it. I would highly recommend it. Yes, it's about Eloy's family, but it's also about history. It's about people. And if you have any regard or any interest in history and people at all, it is well worth it. And believe me, it's an hour and 50 something minutes long. But it doesn't seem like it. It really doesn't seem like it, because when he starts off talking about his family right there in Miami, but then he moves into how far back can we go to trace this not very common surname. And when he hit that point, I was like, oh, I am all in. Let's go. How far back can you go? And I don't want to, again, put you on the spot, but I think from what you have told me, and I never met the man, but I think your father would be very, very proud of the job you did. It was really well done, and I really enjoyed watching it.
Well, I appreciate you saying those words. I mean, I did it to basically honor all these people that were the people that surrounded me, and it was the only like a way to, have them all and their stories in one place for, indefinitely in one spot. So it was a labor of love. It was a lot of work because I've done years of studying now since 2018, since Steve said, "Hey, let me hook you up with an account, guest account," and all the things that have happened since then has, it led up to making this video, and I've got also a book that's going to go on the Internet Archives. This is already up as well on the Internet Archives. So I've basically, all the stuff they left me, documents and papers and stuff, that's the whole idea. To have, instead of leaving it sitting around and then you keel over one day and it just sits there, I'm trying to coalesce and collate, and put them all out there. And so really it's me saying thank you to the people that that I exist because of. So,
well, I think you did a very good job in that endeavor, and I know you've worked hard on it for several months to put it all together and get it rendered and get it posted. And I think you did it. I think you did a very, very good job on it.
Yeah, and the whole idea is nothing to do with whether getting views or not getting views. This is something for beyond
future generations.
Yeah. It's a documentation of people that existed, and it's there for it to be thrusted forward, and it could be dusty in one corner for a decade, 2 decades, 3 decades, 4 decades, forever, but it's there.
Yeah.
I took the time to put it together, gather them, remember them, and it's there. So that's the main idea of it, because we don't last.
Mm-hmm.
We last until we last. And my great uncle Mateo did that in a broader sense for a whole country.
Mm-hmm.
So, it is what we miss our loved ones. We do what we can. And I just happen to be in the position to be able to sit and even put up with sitting looking at the screen and finding things and stuff. I'm that nuts that I'm capable of doing that.
Well, you did it justice, and it's out there for anybody and everybody who wants to see it, and you just don't know where this is going to lead. I mean, it only takes that one person who recognizes a name, finds it in a family Bible, or finds a certificate or something like that to make the connections that you can't make. And how many connections can you make for other people by putting that information out there? So, I mean, you've got me thinking about doing something similar, but I would have to release mine in smaller chunks because I don't know, I love video editing and everything else, but I don't know if I could take the time to dedicate the way you did, because you've been working on this for about a year, haven't you? Just on this video production? Yeah.
Oh, this video, I started at the beginning of the year sometime, but I've been trying, and by the way, I did this with a language that, to be honest with you, I never really wrote or learned to write. I had Spanish class, and I was the guy that did not do anything, as far as effort. But one thing is reading something nowadays, a sentence, modern, you can deal with a sentence. And especially since we have Google Translate and this and that. But to look at documents that I started looking at, because you, Steve, and I would sit and I'd say to you guys, what the hell does this? And we'd take words and we'd patch them together and by the way, I speak Spanish fluently. but that does not mean that I can read and write it and organize it thinking fluently. It may sound I'm bilingual, but I'm not the perfect example of someone that has both tools equally balanced or even closely. But I can defend myself speech wise and this and that. But going to the past and having to look at weird writing, I said, screw it. And I took letter by letter. I started, and at first I would take words in a page, and I'd see that word is that word is that. I'm not an idiot, right? I'm not saying that I'm completely, but remember, they wrote weird.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is that you have a page full of words that are weirdly written in Spanish, but I did it over and over again this whole past year. And before, it's been since 2018 that I've really delved in.
Well, you've been researching documents for, at least 3 years that I know of.
For 3 years now. So I learned, at least with the pages that I've been looking at over and over again, there's keywords. You grab a page, you see that keyword, and I know now that when I see that word, following that word in every page, roughly thereabouts, is the name of the parents.
Right.
Because it says legitimate and then the names of the parents. So now I just go to the pages, or I had been, and grabbing those. And so all the other stuff becomes like a wash, and I find those words. And so anyways, long story short, you can do anything you put your mind to, but it might cost you a lot of sleep and stress and this. So
but it's well worth it. I'm here to shout, it's well worth it. So I just wanted to, I know I put you on the spot because I know you weren't really thinking about doing that, but if you would, I do hope you would post a link to it over on the Trampled Underfoot Podcast Facebook page.
Yeah,
because I know several people would like to see it.
I mean, they could go to my channel and stuff. I really don't. So this is not anything. Obviously, it's good for people to see if they want to see it, but it's more to do with what I said. It's there, not like, let's say, a music video that I'm doing. Hey, you got to check this out. That's a moment now thing. This is something just that I'm leaving with. Maybe I should post. I don't know. I'm kind of like
at least a link to your YouTube channel so people know where to go see it.
Yeah. So we could do that then. So anyways, I think we're done.
Yeah, I think we are too.
We went overboard.
Yeah, we did. But that's okay. I told you this would happen.
And we didn't get to the topic that.
No worries.
All right, guys, listen. We want to thank you for hanging out. This is Trampled Underfoot Podcast. We're live every Tuesday, except today. Live every Tuesday at 9:30 Eastern, 6:30 Pacific. And we do have a YouTube page here on YouTube. We do have a Facebook page, Trampled Underfoot Podcast on Facebook. And you can check us out over on Spreaker as well. Spreaker. And that's Trampled Underfoot Podcast on Spreaker. And we're also sponsored by
Steve Nealon, the man, the myth, the legend, over at Harneal Media. You're looking for a website? You need a web presence. Steve is your man. He is your one-stop shop. He will do as much or as little as you would like. He'd help you set up that website, get it running, help you set up a web store. You can sell your own items. You can set up and connect up with a print-on-demand service that will design that will print your merch. You design the merch, and Steve can help you with that. He doesn't do coasters. I got taken to the woodshed for that because I said coaster, and where coasters came from, I don't know. It just came out.
No, you were going through and you said,
yeah, well, I said, hats, T-shirts, and then for some reason coasters came out.
Well, he has been making coasters with designs, but that's a different story.
Okay. I get it. That's where it came out. Okay.
So
Well, forget the coasters though. Talk to Steve. Talk to Steve anyway. harnealmedia.com. That's HARNEAL media, all one word, .com. He is the sponsor of Trampled Underfoot Podcast.com. Head on over there. That's our website. Click that Wayback Machine link up at the top of the page, and that'll take you back to all the way back to episode 1 if you want to dig that far back. We're currently recording episode number 146, so I'm sure you will find a topic in there that interests you. That's Trampled Underfoot Podcast.com, sponsored by Steve Nealon at Harneal Media.
And folks, that's a wrap for today. We'll catch you here next week. So have a good rest of the week and be good. Be good. Peace.
Peace. All right. Nice long gap and a clap. All right.
Yeah. So I can see the darn thing.
Yeah, we're really. You can see the waveform, that spike. So
see, I didn't expect you to that you were. I had told you before to had watched it, and I really don't. If you notice, I didn't post it over there or anything because my job was to get it done and put it there so it's preserved. Right. I was surprised that you had seen the whole darn thing, to be honest with you.
Like I said, I got into that. How far back can we go? And you had me.
Well, I'm glad I put that part in. See, because
you had me.
one thing I did think about was in the process of the whole thing is that I'm breaking up my story so it can be entertaining as well. So I did think in terms of a flow. Mm-hmm. I did think in terms of that. So
you did it well. You did it well. Like I said, you had me. So let's see. Let's go through the comments here. Rick French. Hey kids, didn't realize that the show would be on tonight until I got the notification that it was starting. I'll watch as long as my phone stays alive. Are you still with us, Rick? Oh, he was at 18%, so probably not. Let's see. Oh, we were talking about Mad Magazine, and I mentioned Spy versus Spy. Lindsay also mentioned it. I left out a comic book. This you would have to call a comic book. Almost an adult comic book. Did you ever read Heavy Metal?
No, I never bought those, but I remember Heavy Metal though. I do remember it.
It was that kind of surprises me because to me that seems to be more in your wheelhouse. It was kind of a sci-fi action adventure, but it was pretty gritty. They didn't follow the rules that the comic books did.
They had a cartoon length feature, as well,
a movie. Yes,
I remember renting that one and watching it, but it's like they're like an orb and then all these things and it's psychedelic and all that. But I wasn't too into it though, but I did rent it and watch it for some reason.
Soundtrack to that movie is my number one most often stolen cassette and CD. I bought the soundtrack to that movie I don't know how many times, and whenever I took it to a party, I ended up having to buy another one because somebody would steal it. There's some good music on that soundtrack. Okay. Just my dog says Eloy should try reading Lovecraft. The kind of imagining you have to do with that is special. Okay. Not read any Lovecraft. I've not.
I tried reading Stephen King because I did make efforts.
Yeah.
But I was more into freaking biographies, dude. And honestly, that's what I was. I enjoyed biographies, but I tried Stephen King, and I couldn't do it, dude, because I kept thinking these people aren't even real.
The only Stephen King novel I ever read was Cujo when it first came out. And it was pretty decent, but I never really got into that genre. I wasn't really interested in it. I was more of a true adventure, or let's see, I got into true crime for a while. I liked detective stories. Some of the Westerns I liked, but I liked adventure stories as well. And World War II era stories as well. Like They Were Expendable. There's a book about the Civil War called The Red Badge of Courage. It's a classic. It's a good book.
Writing styles also matter too.
Right.
How people write, that can affect,
Uh-huh.
a person reading a book and stuff. But if it's something like let's say the Beatles or the John Lennon biography, which is a huge book, which I read as an example, I already know how John Lennon looks. I know that fiction writers will describe it to you in their way, but there's a lot of work already done for your imagination
Right.
with a book that's a life, a real life situation. And there's so I don't know what it is, but to be honest with you, I've had to answer that question since we've had these conversations about books, audio, and comic books and this and that. And I realized that, I never thought of it before, but to me, the main thing is that if it's a real life thing, like George Washington's life, let's do this, because now you're going to name me places and things that occurred that,
And that's why I was talking about the true adventure stories. There was one of the better books that I have ever read. My dad bought it here in Medford when the library was selling off some of their old books that just weren't being checked out or weren't being really used at all. And it was called Pacific Ordeal. And I don't remember who the author was, but he was captain of this ship that was towing 3 minesweepers around. They came down the Atlantic coast through the Panama Canal and then across the Pacific. I think they were destined for either Singapore or Saipan. I don't remember which. And he had to deliver these. They were towing 3 minesweepers with no crew aboard the minesweepers. And they made it down the Atlantic coast and through the Panama Canal just fine. But after that, every single thing just went wrong. Everything that could go wrong did go wrong, and it was all true, 100% true. But it was one heck of a story. And it's told kind of in a documentary style, but you are in that book. It's like, holy cow, how did these people live through this junk?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, look, I'm not trying to say that in my case, it was like that. And then I built a habit because I read a lot at one point.
Yeah.
I'm not going to consider, for this exercise, we're not considering internet necessarily reading. We're talking about a book that's actual book that you sit with on your own time, and it's you and the book. I couldn't get it. Maybe I never came across the one that really sparked my or maybe I'm just built that way. But I can watch fantasy movies.
It took me a while too. I mean, I was about 12. I started reading myself to sleep when I was about 12. But again, we're talking like Mad Magazine or Hot Rod cartoons or something like that. Just something to clear my brain. I have an overactive brain in that if I just lay down, shut off the light, and close my eyes, my brain kicks in. 1 sheep, 2 sheep, 3 sheep, red sheep, blue sheep. Hey, Macarena. And off we go. My brain will just start going in 72,000 different directions. And then I'm up and I'm on the internet,
Yeah.
Whereas before I would just lay there and look at the damn ceiling. So I have to have something to occupy my brain so it will shut up and let me go to sleep. And then eventually I'll drift off. But I didn't start getting into, I was reading magazines and hot rod magazines and stuff like that up until I was like, 15, 16, 17. And then I started getting into novels, and it took me a while to really get into them. And then all of a sudden, whammo.
If you need to go to
And
sleep, oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
well, I've tried to break myself of that habit. So, for the last, I guess it's been 3 or 4 years now, I don't read myself to sleep anymore. I shut off all the lights and I put on a playlist of YouTube videos, 4 or 5 videos,
Yeah.
and I turn the volume down so nothing comes on and startles. And I'll sit there and listen and let the voices in the background occupy my brain so I can fall asleep.
It's great because I have a good solution. That's a perfect solution. But my take is I put on Star Trek: The Next Generation. It'll put me to sleep, and because so I put it on, and by the time I don't realize it, I'm freaking gone. And because the Star Wars Next Generation is not that it's dull, but it's kind of
It's dull.
it's
It's dull. There, I said it, and I'm glad. And I know I'm going to cheese somebody off when I say I never got into Star Trek. I really did. I thought it was boring as heck. I really did. Okay, yeah, there's Klingons and this, that, and the other. But to me, it was just like, Batman had fights and the car chases and climbing the building and the Batcopter and the Batboat and all this other good stuff. Well, Star Trek was just a bunch of guys sitting around in a round living room.
yeah.
And then suddenly they're down on a desert and, a lizard guy. Okay, great. That was fine for about 35 seconds. But other than that, they're just, it was no different to me than Gunsmoke. The only difference was it wasn't in a saloon. It was in a spaceship you couldn't see.
I did like the original Star Trek. I did enjoy that, but the Next Generation has its level of extra boredom that just does it for you. To be honest with you, it'll put you to. It puts me to sleep. In fact, I mean that's probably what I'll do tonight. I'll put that on and I'll be gone. I'll be gone in no time.
I think about the last science fiction based TV show that I actually watched. That I thought was even halfway decent was Battlestar Galactica. And I know it was a complete ripoff of Star Wars. They tried to piggyback off of Star Wars' popularity.
That was so cheesy. That was cheesy even back then.
It was cheesy back then, but that's about the only one that was really worth the ding dong. I didn't like Space 1999. I didn't like Star Trek. We already talked about that. Time Tunnel, Land of the Giants. Lost in Space was okay, but Lost in Space and what was the other one? Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea. Those were adventure shows to me. They weren't. It wasn't. To me, I equated science fiction with the spaceship on the thread and the big dumb rubber monsters and things like that. To me, those were adventure stories. But Frankie CNC and Woodworking Channel said Smallville was good. I never watched Smallville, and I never watched Lois and Clark either. I was watching other things then. I kind of got out of, like I said, the last superhero I really, really watched was Adam West and Burt Ward in the 60s.
Yeah,
go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, you go ahead.
I was going to say, Jim Dockrell says, stop making stupid people famous, the Kardashians. Preach, brother. Preach it from the highest mountain.
Yeah, but my question to Jim is, can he say, and we have to take your word for it, that he's not seen one episode? I can say confidently, I'm telling you flat out, I've not seen one. I just know the social significance of saying Kardashian, and there's an attachment to like shallowness and like excess and this and that. I'm sure that that's not necessarily true, but there's like this sort of vanity thing attached to it. It sounds so regal, but not necessarily. I was going to say trashy, but I don't want to. There's a sense of like shallowness to it. I could be totally wrong. Not one episode, he says, but. I'm gonna have to
you just nailed it. There's nothing but shallowness and superficiality with it. And it's the same thing with Paris Hilton. Can you tell me one thing that they have done?
I like Paris Hilton.
They have done nothing. They've done absolutely nothing.
But she's
They were just
cute.
born to be celebrities. Oh, she's cute, but there's a lot of cute people out there who can actually do something. They can sing, they can dance, they can act. They were born as celebrities because their daddy did something. You know?
But she doesn't seem mean like Paris Hilton doesn't, because she had a show with her friend, which was the daughter of Lionel Richie, I think it was.
And that which proves my points. They took the daughter, they took the heiress of the Hilton Hotel fortune and the daughter of Lionel Richie and put those two together and made a show that lasted what, a year?
I actually enjoyed it because they put them what they would do. See, that one I did watch. I'll be honest. If I've watched something, I'll tell you I watched it. If I didn't, I'll tell you I didn't. Maybe not all the time, but I'll admit that I did watch it, and I like that they took these Hollywood girls and put them like in the middle of like a family in Kentucky, let's say, and that they had to live their life in that, you know, and they're always like, well, where's my phone and this and that. It's cheap entertainment, but I didn't see them as mean. Like, you know, the
Okay,
snobby.
I'll give you that.
There's the snobby, mean, vindictive, like there's an evilness, and then you have just your fancy schmancy Hollywood, you know, socialites, but she didn't have that evil in her, I would say.
Yeah, okay, and I can see that. You make a good point in that regard, but it was shows like that as they started becoming more and more popular that made me turn further and further away from commercial TV, to the point to where I couldn't name, unless it was on, it's been on for a long time, like Antiques Roadshow or something like that. I couldn't name you any TV shows on now. It's been that long since I've watched any television.
The Roadshow one is a great one that I really enjoy. And also, believe it or not, I don't know, it's been suggested to me lately. Pawn Stars or something like that.
When that first started, like the first 2 seasons, I watched it. But after that, they started going, quote unquote, reality TV. And it became a farce of itself. And it got to the point to where, I don't even know if it's still on, but like the first season, it was okay. It was never really gripping television, but if there was nothing else on, you could watch it and it would be all right.
There was one episode where the guy brings in a potato. And did you see that one? Mm-hmm. And he tries to sell the potato, and he sold it for $2.50. So the guy, you know, the one son that's a little bit slower a little bit. The guy comes in and he says, "I want to sell this potato," and the guy, what? I know this is all set up, but he says, "This potato was saved. This is one of the potatoes that were thrown at Martin Luther King in one of his speeches." and he bought it for $2.50.
Jeez. Now they've had some genuinely good stuff on there. I mean, they didn't have Les Paul's guitar. They had Mary Ford's Gibson SG, his wife. And they used to record and play together. And they bought it. Don't remember how much they bought it for, but they auctioned it off for $100 and some odd $1,000. And that was actually very cool seeing that. But they've done some other weird stuff. I know a woman, Linda and I know a woman who was on the show. She sold them a Walkman that belonged to her first husband, John Entwistle, the bassist of The Who. It was a sterling silver Walkman engraved for him. And
that's a fancy frickin' Walkman.
It was given to him by Sony, and his recognition of, I don't remember which. It was kind of almost sort of like an award, but they bought it from her. And dude,
you can find Walkmans back then in like your local Eckerd Drugs or whatever. I don't know in your area what the local like drugstore was.
Yeah.
There Walkmans everywhere, but never a freaking sterling silver.
Not one that was engraved, presented to John Entwistle of the Who, for recognition of such and such stuff like that, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah. My wife Linda just says, "Remember Max?" Yeah, that's who we're talking about. Maxine is her name. So
Max
yeah.
Headroom.
No, not Max Headroom. Let's see here. We were talking about coasters at the very end. Linda says, "But I want a coaster." And Steve come along and says, "You have a husband that does CNC. Coasters should be easy." Yeah, Steve, what I want to do, and I've had this idea for a long time, is I want to find a limb off a tree that's about so big around, you know, the right size, coaster size, and I want to cut about half-inch thick cookies out of it and sand them all up nice and pretty, and then set them on the CNC table and engrave "I was Groot."
Oh,
That's
funny.
a Guardians of the Galaxy reference, since we were talking about sci-fi and superheroes and stuff.
Yeah.
So I thought that would be cool. Make a bunch of those.
I saw Dave Gatton spinning CNCing a chess piece.
Yeah, he's got a couple of them. He made the king. He likes it. It turned out okay, but he was kind of disappointed in it. He has since made the queen and a knight with the horse's head that looks cool as heck. And he was doing the bishop today. So I don't know, is he going to do an entire chess set? But these things are pretty big.
Yeah, it looked like maybe a 5 inches.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's these things are pretty tall. I don't know exactly how tall they are. He never said, that I saw anyway.
Maybe they're bigger than 5 inches, because I remember looking at the bit and the length of it and sort of calculating out slightly.
Well, what he did was he took 2 pieces of 2x4 and then surface planed them so that to cut about 1/8 of an inch off, so they had a flat surface to get rid of those rounded edges, and he glued them together. So you can figure it's 3 inches thick. Well, roughly 3 inches thick, maybe 2 3/4 inches thick by the time you're all said and done, and kind of extrapolate out from that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know if he's making a complete set or if he's just turning one of each piece to see what it looks like.
That's pretty
see
cool.
how it came out. So
I like that as a project.
Yep. One of these days I'd like to do that too. Well, let's see. I think we're caught up on the comments. Jim Dockrell says heavy metal was cool. The movie was awesome. I was so stoned when I saw it the first time. Okay. I wasn't stoned. I was drinking screwdrivers. Let's see. Reality TV shows have very little to do with reality, says Jim Dockrell. You just nailed it. It's all scripted. It's all scripted. I mean, they will tell you what to say, when to say it, how to do it. It's 100% scripted. And that's the direction Pawn Stars went. And so did American Pickers, which is why I don't watch those either. You know?
Yeah, it's all set up because if you go about life and what just like record, try to make an episode of just normal stuff, 90% of what people do is what I'm doing now. I'm scratching myself. Like I'm going in my shirt and I'm scratching. I got an itch, so I scratch. Yeah. You know, like most of the stuff people do is kind of like just nothing.
Yeah. I mean, the last quote unquote reality show I think I really got into, and I was into it for a while. But the last 2 seasons, it really took a nosedive and I didn't like it. And that was a show was on TLC called Junkyard Wars. And it was based on a British show called Scrap Heap Challenge. And that was, you had 2 teams of builders that had 2 bays and a complete junkyard at their disposal. And they would get the teams together and say, build me a whatever. Build me an amphibious vehicle. You can have all the supplies and hardware you need, but all of your parts have to be taken from the junkyard. And they would do it. They would go figure out how the heck they were going to make a car float, and how are you going to propel it once it's in the water, and then start going out and just scavenging for parts. And, okay, we got 11 55-gallon drums, let's bring them all in and we'll put some air in it and see do they leak and all this, that, and just make a car that they could drive and then take into the water and propel it, and then off you go. That funny? Was cool.
It reminds me of a taxi driver guy or just neighborhood guys. They took a 1950s car, and they turned it into a freaking floating boat. They put drums all around it, and you know what they did?
They escaped Cuba that way.
They drove it over the water to Florida, dude. It was in the news. It was like, because you have examples of crafty stuff like that, and then you have examples of just like a couple of empty water jugs and some sort of cloth and maybe a piece of wood, and there's but there's some that get a freaking vehicle and do that and all sorts of crazy stuff.
Oh yeah. I mean, they did all kinds of stuff like that. Make a train that will run down a track here's the gauge of the track. Make a train, but you have to get all of your parts out of the junkyard. They would supply welding rod and they would supply grinder discs and things like that. But you had I think it was a 14-hour day to build this thing. And then time's up, tools down, wherever you're at. And then the next day they move these machines over to wherever it was they were going to put them to the test. And the one that actually worked and actually completed whatever task it was designed to complete, they were the winner, and they got a trophy and all this, and they got money and all that other good stuff. The first few seasons, it was actually pretty good. But then people started noticing that things started getting set up. Things were being placed out in the junkyard because the number one, the one that was most obvious, and this is where the show jumped the shark, was they wanted them to build a rocket that didn't look like a rocket. And they planted rocket motors out there for them.
Yeah.
And so it's you're not going to find live rocket motors out in a junkyard. So don't even say that. Just say, we will supply you with rocket motors. Here's your motor and here's your motor.
And be done with it.
Yes. So, but that, then after that, it kind of, the hosts changed and they were losing viewers, and it just kind of dived from there. But it was called Junkyard Wars, and it was a pretty good show the first couple of seasons. So,
all right, I think it's time to boogie.
Yeah, we haven't had any comments in a while yet. So, yeah, okay. Jim Dockrell says not one episode of pretty much any reality show. Oh, I watched some of the Gene Simmons ones. See, I never watched any of that either. I didn't watch the Osbournes. I didn't watch any of that. I never saw the appeal.
The Osbournes was pretty, but it, in small doses. Yeah, in small doses.
Never watched any of it.
All right, guys. We'll catch you next time. Enjoy the rest of your week.
Take care, y'all. Thank you for joining us, and have a good night.